Breaking into advertising can be a complex process. One of the best ways to land in a creative advertising shop is to know what you want to be. And nobody has the time to intern and try out each role in advertising, so I bring on guests of all varieties to shed insight on precisely what they do. Sean Riojas not only tells us about being a producer, a role that is often overlooked on this podcast, but tells us about how to be a great one. He mentions that most agencies do not require entry-level producers to have hard skills like videography, editing, and photography, though that does help. Instead, anyone who wants to break into production must possess innate curiosity. From New York City to Richmond, Virginia, Sean made the calculated career move to Arts and Letters Creative Company. Sean is our first guest from Arts and Letters, and he talks about the agency in this episode along with vast amounts of insight and advice tailored just for you. You can tell he loves to give back. And if you like what Sean has to offer this episode, and you enjoy problem solving, you're curious, organized, and want a more hands-on, project-based career, production may be for you. Connect with Sean by heading and following our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod. One more time, that's at Breaking and Entering Pod on Instagram. If you follow and message the account directly with your interest, I will personally connect you with Sean or any other guest. And I would like to note that this episode is supported by Chicago Portfolio School. They specialize in getting people their dream jobs in creative advertising agencies and client side at cool brands. Visit chicagoportfolio.com for more details. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. Sean Riojas, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. What a cool name. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Gino. I'm super excited. Like I mentioned before, when we were kind of doing a pre-pro, I've worked on a lot of podcasts and I've been behind the scenes a lot. So it's really interesting and great to like kind of talk about, my journey and kind of help some folks break and enter into this industry.
Let's go. Perfect. And this is going to be your podcast. So this is all about you. And we should be proud of that. Sean, you're a cool guy. You are a producer at Arts and Letters Creative Company over, where is it at?
Arts and Letters Creative Co., located in Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. I would say Richmond is definitely a untapped source of creativity. I'll be honest. Before I came here, I'm from New York. I lived in New York. I worked in agencies in New York, and I kind of thought that was the end all be all. But I kind of expanded my search and kind of discovered this place. Martin Agency is also out here, but we're not going to shout them out. Feel free to bleep that if you like. But yeah,
we'll talk about
Arts
that.
and Letters. Arts and Letters is great. I've been here actually today. Well, I'm not sure when you'll post this, but the day that we are recording is actually my 1 year anniversary. So
I'm cool. I didn't know that. Perfect timing. Well, happy 1 year. That's a major mark in most agency careers. 1 year in a company. Some people think of moving. I don't think you are. But yeah, you already tapped into the first thing I want to talk about is Richmond, commonly known for Martin Agency. But a lot of people I talk to about Richmond will also say Arts and Letters. Check it out. Check out their work. They're just as creative. They're doing amazing things. So I had to get somebody on, and you popped up. You're a producer, and I was talking to you before this podcast. I haven't had a lot of producers on the podcast, and quite frankly, I'm not the most knowledgeable about what people in production do. So I'm excited to talk about your journey. You've been at cool agencies. You're at a cool agency now. You have an interesting role that I'm not that familiar with. So we've got a lot to uncover. But, tell us about your role today as a producer at Arts and Letters. What are you doing? How would you describe it to somebody that's not that familiar with that term?
Yeah, great question. I would say the way I would describe production, because I feel like everyone in advertising deals with this, but my parents ask me all the time, like, what do you do?
Hmm.
And the easiest way to describe it is saying, I make commercials. Production has an array of positions, so it's not just broadcast production, but that's like kind of like the main focus, and that's what people think of when they think of the agency producer. I'd say to someone who's not familiar with advertising, in layman's terms, I think a producer is kind of um, I would describe them, because I'm a superhero fan, as like Alfred, or if you're a Matrix fan, as the operator. We are the person who gets it done in the background, and we're the person that once you have an idea, or have this thing that you want to make, we're like, all right, how do we bring it to life? And it's super exciting. I think no, I mean, I feel like everyone advertises this, but no day is like any other day.
Heard that. Yep.
I remember working on projects where I had to wrangle, you can go somewhere from, like, doing a spot with a soda brand, and trying to get drinks, to doing ideas where you need a, an animal wrangler, because you know you need dogs to do something special on a sofa, and stuff like that, always intrigued me, and that's what's kept me going in this game. I think that's what keeps a lot of people in advertising, specifically production, because I think it's, I don't know how to describe that feeling, but if I could bottle it up into one description, I'd say seeing that thing you made in the world
Hmm.
is like winning a championship.
Yeah. Wow.
I used to play sports when I was younger. I do work out for leisure, but I would say anytime I've gone through a difficult production, even if it wasn't TV, if it was like something on YouTube or something on social, um, I don't know how to describe that feeling, but it's just like when you're like, all this hard work, all this time, all this effort was worth it. And especially when it's a great response. I mean, you
Yeah.
have clients who've done ads, and it was a bad ad, and nowadays with social media, people can kind of give immediate comments,
Oh
and
yeah.
it could go left, but if it goes right,
Hmm.
it's sky's the limit for sure.
What are some of those recent championship moments in your production career that you're really proud of that come to mind?
Um, Great question. I would say there are two.
Okay.
One is a brand that I can't speak on, but I'm sure people could figure it out. But for the past 7 or 8 months, I've been working on this project with a team, and it's been a lot, because it was the launch of a new product. And I would say it, just putting in all that time and work, and people who don't work in advertising, who don't understand, are like, wait, like, it's after 5 o'clock, why are you still on your laptop? Or it's
Mhm.
weekends, like, why are you still answering emails? It's like, a lot of people don't get it unless you're in the industry, but it's just like that moment where it was launch day,
Mhm.
and to see that piece of creative that I worked
Right.
on, out in the world, and share it with my friends and family. I mean, they're not super hyped about it, but when I show them, like, hey, this is why, my head was down for like the last 7 months, like, oh wow, like, I get it.
Mhm.
Like,
You did that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you did that. And like, I think people should know, like, it doesn't matter if you're doing like a 15-second commercial, or a social post, or a 3-minute film, or everything is a lot of time, a lot of work, and it being very detail oriented, because it's going out in the world.
Mhm.
um so yeah, that was the most recent moment. And then I would say last year I had that same feeling, when I was at my older agency. um there was it was, I wouldn't say prime pandemic, but like kind of mid pandemic. And for people who weren't in the industry, I think everything was kind of in flux because, there was no production in LA. Things were on a halt. There was no
Hmm.
vaccine out yet. And I think people, there was a standstill for a while where nothing was being made. Or if it was being made, people were taking huge risks. And I think, the moment that I had this like championship feeling was this one project where um, we had reached a time in the pandemic where remote productions kind of people got a handle on it. They were like, all right, we're going to figure out how to get you to see this production and view it the way you would if you were there. Aside from the perks of, going out to client dinners and stuff. But yeah, like, I worked on this brand and we worked on three
Can you give
15
details
details of the production or
of the brand
details.
and the agency?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. It was at my old agency, Shy Day, New York.
Yeah.
Shout out to TVWA, Shy Day, New York. That was a great company, and I was there for like 4.5 years, which
Yep.
I guess is dinosaur years in ad time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the brand was it was a beverage brand. I won't say the brand, but I'm sure
Okay.
if you look at their roster, you can figure it out.
Hmm.
But but yeah, we worked on 3 15-second um videos that kind of landed in different spaces online, on TV. And I think I had that moment because for one of the commercials we did like a song and made made like a vinyl and kind of blew the idea up bigger than what it was. And yeah, like I think for me the reason why I had that championship feeling was because we were able to have a successful remote production and people were trying to figure it out at that time. I mean, now if you mention it to people, they're like, oh yeah, that's simple. Like, you know here's how we're going to
Hmm.
connect the agency, here's how we're going to connect the clients. You can use Zoom, Google Meet, whatever.
Right. But it was
But back
uncharted
then,
times.
yeah,
Yeah.
people were just trying to, hey, here's this saying that if you haven't heard any podcasts, you will hear it in advertising. We were building the plane as we were flying it.
Yep.
And that was definitely, what we were doing well, everyone was doing that at the time, honestly.
Right. Right. So what would you say like are the main skills that you need or that you have that make you a great producer?
I think the main skills that lead to a great producer, um, it's gonna sound a little basic at first, but I think being organized. I think being able to kind of organize and work on schedules and align people
Right.
is very important. Um, that's something you kind of learn over time. That's not something you get when you kind of first start out. I think a lot of people have that, and I can talk about this in more detail after. But I think a lot of people when they first start out have that like nervousness of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying to figure it out. And like, I have all this responsibility and I've never had this before. And, a lot of people like, are like related to sports, a lot of people can fold in those kind of pressure situations.
Right. So
Um,
organization. Is there any like hard skills like photography or anything like I don't know, editing that you just have to have like
no,
other than
not
those
at
softer
all.
skills?
I think you have to have, I would say those hard skills help. I think being able to look at an edit, being able to edit or being able to do photography, no lighting, no sound, all that helps. Like even before I got into production, I actually took like a course just to make sure I wanted to do it, and like it was like a film course, like a couple weeks long. I forget what the company was called. It was back in New York, but this was years ago. I went on it. And I was like, all right, let me just make sure I kind of like this before I before I even get into this, which I think is super important. Sorry, just to do a quick tangent. I think before you do anything in advertising, um, you know, try to take a class, take a course, or like intern, just work in it because you'll know if you listen to your gut, you'll know like, hey, I can do this for the next 15, 20 years, or like, no, I can't deal with this.
Hmm.
Um,
True.
but yeah, just to kind of get back on course. Yeah, I think those things help, but you'll kind of develop that skill over time. Like if you work in broadcast production and work on commercials, you'll learn what a good comedy spot looks like. You'll see that over time. Your eye kind of your mind kind of learns like, oh, okay, like this is this is when the joke hits. I wouldn't say it's formulaic, but in a sense, you kind of learn like what's good and what's not. At first, I didn't know. Like I'd be in an edit with a
Mhm.
senior producer, and I'd be like, looks good to me.
Mhm.
Um,
It takes
and
time.
over time, and over time, you kind of see like, oh yeah, like that wasn't smooth, or that could be better, or yeah,
Mhm.
you need a transition here,
Yeah.
and you learn that. I would say for the most part, I think there's a lot of soft skills that come in play with production. I think just having emotional intelligence, because the thing is, you're leading your team. You know, you're kind of scheduling anything with the creatives. You're working with the business manager slash account person, and then with some places you're working directly with the client, so you have to
Mhm.
be able to um, put people at ease. I had this skill that I think is a curse and a benefit, but I've been told that sometimes I'm too laid back. um like in terms of
Mhm.
just like how my personality is, and I think that's helped because in like huge pressure situations, people are like, well, our producer's cool, so I think he's chilling, and he's not blowing his gasket. So I think we're gonna be
Mhm.
fine. And
That's good.
I've had some people say like, hey, like, um, you're not showing enough urgency. But it's really just because, like, you know, to what I just said, like I don't want, you know, you don't want your team to panic. You want people to feel confident, even if you don't have the answers, that you're confident enough that we'll figure it out together. You know, it's a big team effort.
Gotcha. Okay, I want to kick it back to how you got started. Like one of the big points of this podcast is to figure out how you broke into advertising, just so we can learn from, what you did, maybe what you would recommend like differently. But let's kick it back to like maybe when you were in college or when you decided, when was that point when you decided, hey, I want to do this like for a career?
Ah, man, I'm actually glad you asked this. I hope I don't get on a long tangent. I feel like I've only told this story to like two people. Sorry, let me just take a sip of water.
No, yeah, no. Well, you're gonna tell it to a lot more people now. So I'm excited.
Mm, so, um, I originally went to City College of New York, and that sigh wasn't because of the college. I'm just breathing. But I went to City College of New York, where I studied PR and advertising. Um, oh, actually, sorry, let me take a step back. I originally
Mhm.
went for computer science. That's where my dad
Okay.
went. And then I realized, like, hey, I don't like math that much. And what am I
It's
going
a
to
great
do?
major though. There's a lot of money in computer science.
There is, but I think one thing I realized is that if you do something you love, the money is going to come.
Oh yeah.
You just have to be patient. I think when I was young, it was kind of like I was like, all right, I gotta get out of college. I gotta get a high paying job. I gotta figure it
Mhm.
out. Like what's gonna pay me when I get like what's gonna give me a job and pay me immediately.
Right.
And I think, you know, I what I did was, you know, looking back, was the right thing to do. Um
Of course. Of course. I was just
and
making. I
like
was just messing around. I know some computer science
yeah.
guys, and it's just they do make a lot of money, but they work. If you're good with numbers, it's just different.
Oh
I did
yeah.
not love that at all.
Oh man. What if you don't mind me asking, do you work in advertising or in the podcast realm? Because I wanted to say this in the beginning, I forgot. You are very good. I've listened to a few episodes. You are very
Yeah,
good
oh,
at
I
your
work
work.
at Chicago Portfolio School. I do their university outreach. I do like their
Okay.
PR and the pod. This podcast is independent, but we work together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I've listened to a lot of podcasts. I've produced a few, and I will say you're very good at this.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Um, so yeah, back to the story. So basically, I remember like it was yesterday. I was in the library with my friend Shane Alexander.
Shout out.
Shout out to Shane. I believe his major was electrical engineering. So I do have a few engineering and computer science friends. But
Mhm.
basically, I was in the library. I had done most of my pre-clear credits that you have to do before you declare a major. And at this point, I'd already said like, hey, I'm not going to do computer science, but I wanted to stay at City College because I had made so many friends. Um, so I don't advise this to most people, but what I did was I literally went on the website and I was like, okay, what majors does this school have? I just went through the list, And
Mhm.
I came upon advertising. I was like, well, I like commercials.
Mhm.
Um, I wonder how they're made and like what goes in the process of this. And the reason why I shout out Shane Alexander and like, to this day, like I thank him is um at this time it was like November, December, and we had to choose our classes for spring. And um intro to advertising was full. And I would have had to wait until the following fall to take the class. Because he was electrical engineer, he was in the class, but it was just like he just needed the class for credit.
Mhm.
He didn't need to take the class. So what we did was he was like, oh, like if you're interested, I could drop the class. The
Nice.
way the system worked at City College was like as soon as someone drops out, like the spot is available and you can grab it up.
Yep.
So like, we went to the computer, he dropped the class, I picked up the class, and from there, I remember going into um intro to advertising first day. And I was
Mhm.
like, I really like, well, first of all, I would say it did, not that this was a reason to stay in the major, but it did have a lot of the, um, most beautiful students in there in that major.
Absolutely.
So that does help, you focus and want to stay in a major. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I remember being in first day of class. I forget. I think my professor's name. I apologize if I got this wrong. I think it was David Harris.
David Harris.
If I'm not mistaken. If not,
Sure.
I will shoot you a note after and we
Yeah,
could put
yeah.
a correction. But I remember Professor Harris was like my first teacher, and like I remember it was intriguing because he worked a lot of ad professors actually work in the industry while they're teaching. So
Mhm.
like he
Practice.
was I just fell in love and I was like, yeah, this is what I think I want to do. And then
Mhm.
um from there, I kind of just went through the motions of the classes and um
What year
you
was
know,
that in your college career?
oh man, I feel like you're dating me
Was it
now. It was 2000
Oh, I don't know. I don't
and
need the year. I just say were you a freshman, sophomore, junior,
oh,
senior?
oh, oh, I was going into my like junior year.
Okay, so you kinda stumbled upon it later on. Did you finish in 4 years?
Like 4.5.
Okay. Well, good.
Yeah. I could have did it more if I would have took more classes, but like
Yeah.
I think Chicago might be similar to New York, where it's like mine was a city like slash state school, so like
Mhm.
at the time I wanted to work, I didn't stay on campus, so like I think
Mhm.
if I would went to more of a university where you're on campus, I think, and that would have been like my sole focus, then I
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
would have went to more classes. But
What were you doing on the side in school?
I was working. I was working actually in restaurants. I was working at Red Lobster
Yeah.
as like a grill master chef.
Oh,
And I
cool.
and I and I did a couple other
You
jobs
still
like
got it?
working at bars. Oh yeah, man, grill. I could still grill. I get a
You're the
couple
grill master.
compliments when I put the steak on or the lobster or whatever on the grill.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So you finished and you were working the same time, so that's very admirable.
yeah.
Uh, but shout out to your friend and then the professor, and then it was history from there. So then you knew from there, like you were interested in advertising, and then how'd you get to production? And tell me about how you broke in. Like, what was your first job? Was it an internship that led you in there? Was it a friend of a friend situation? How did you break into the industry is like the big question.
Yeah, I think the way it is now, there's several ways you could do it nowadays. Like I mean, like
Oh
there's
yeah.
agencies that you can just email them and they'll give you a shot. For me, another quick shout out to my professor for my final thesis, Nancy R. Tag, Professor Tag. At the time, she was like quote unquote like the most difficult professor, not difficult in terms of like to work with, but like she was the type of professor who believed in her students and like would push you to your best. And I wanted to work with her specifically.
Hmm.
And actually I'll actually make that a point to anyone trying to get in this industry is like um you know always work on the most, when you're starting out, I think working on the most difficult projects and working with in the most difficult situations will will breed, confidence and experience and skill that you wouldn't get if you worked on something easy.
Yeah,
That's for
makes sense.
sure. But yeah, to make long story short, I remember it was winter, school was ending, and like I would say I was a little arrogant in the sense of like I was like, I'm not gonna do an internship while I'm in school. I'm just gonna work. Looking back, I definitely think doing internships while you're in school is a better option because like when you get out of school, or even if you're not in school, doing internships
Mhm.
before you get that job helps because you have that real life, real world skill that's going to help you when you're actually on a project, when you're actually
Of
dealing with
course.
clients. Um, like and looking back at it, I should have just quit my job because I didn't really need the money. I was living in my parents' house, and just
Mhm.
like focus. But I wanted some money. I wanted
You
to
know,
shop. I wanted to do things, all that
I've
stuff.
come across a different perspective that I would agree 100% with that, but obviously in account management and strategy, anytime or and on those non-creative roles, I would say, and not saying they're not creative, but internships are mandatory, I think, for those roles. But if you're a creative, like, and you want to be like a great copywriter or art director, I don't know production, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty my new theory from the school here too is sometimes these internships will be like from smaller places, and just because it's real work doesn't mean it's going to be the most creative work. And you
Mm.
can try to make it creative, but sometimes if you're doing coupon ads and they just don't allow you to, like, that can kind of hinder like your time and your experience. Like, so I always recommend, like, if you don't have an internship, don't worry, do spec work. Like, get with your friends, create like a little team, and then create your own like spec work. Look at briefs online from like Young Shits, DNAD, whatever those are, and like tackle those briefs on. But what are your thoughts like from production or just like that in general? Like, some internships might not be that productive.
Yeah, I think I will rebuttal with the with I think if internships don't work for you, or if you feel like, hey, like I don't want to do an internship, I think also finding this is another route that's a little difficult, but trying to find a mentor. Like
Hmm.
for me, I think finding someone who's done something you want to do and reaching out to them and be like, hey, like
Oh yeah,
I want to work with you. I wanna like shadow you.
yeah.
How can we make this happen?
That's
Um,
really smart. That's
I
really
think
smart.
that's another way of doing it because then
Mhm.
a lot of people want to mentor people, but a lot of times they
Absolutely.
don't either have the time or they don't know how to find a mentee. So I think if you reach out to someone,
We Are
I
Next
think
has like that coffee at a distance. It's a really
oh,
good like mentorship finding.
yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I think mentorship is more important and finding the right mentor. But
Hmm.
to your original point about spec work, I think I think you should do spec work regardless of if you have an internship or a mentor. Because the thing that I think being at an agency teaches you is the process. Like the one thing I will say I learned from the first job to this job is the process doesn't really change. Like
Hmm.
once you know, it's kind of like math. Like once you know the basics of algebra and once you know the basics of the process, you can do any job. The only thing that changes is the scale of the job. So, like if you do spec work, for example, um, you may not learn the exact process of how to do, how to invoice, speaking production specifically, how to do a PO, how to invoice somebody, how to work with vendors, how to triple bid something, how to negotiate something. And a lot of that processy stuff is something you'll learn. Like, I don't think you need to go to a huge agency. Like, I don't think you need to go to like
Hmm.
something under WPP, but like, I think getting that process under your belt is what's super important because that'll like I can honestly say what I learned at my first job has given me leeway to go into and even
Yeah.
into now like everything I learned there.
S-
Um,
So let's
but
loop
yeah,
it
go ahead.
back because I interrupted you and I
No, no, all
apologize.
good. No, that
But
was a
you,
that was a great point. I love that. Yeah.
but you were saying, you said I don't really need an internship. When you looking back, we just talked about that might not have been the right case. But so you didn't have an internship when you were with this professor's class, right? You were going from there.
Yeah, but yeah. Just to make a long story short, yeah, basically I went to my professor's office and I was like, hey, like, do you know of any internships? Do you know of anything? And she was like, hey, I know this guy at this agency, small agency. Um, Uniworld, it was called Uniworld Group,
Okay.
UWG. And she was like I think if you reach out, they're looking for some people. Um, Actually, I kind of lied. I did do an internship over the summer in PR. I didn't like PR, but
Okay.
the one thing I would say about internships and when you're starting out is just like um, when I started at this agency, I got in PR, but I told them like, hey, like I don't know what I want to do. I kind of want to move around. And being at a smaller agency, I think to me was what I did, and I would recommend that to anybody because although you sometimes have to do a lot more heavy lifting and a lot more work, you get to
Hmm.
do more. You're involved in more of the process and you learn more, in my opinion.
Of course.
Versus at a bigger agency, I think you have less footprint
Yeah.
to move and do something.
So you're at
Um,
UWG.
yeah, and there I floated around. I worked in account side, media. Um, what else? Strategy. I kind of talked to everybody. I had a way of figuring out what I wanted to do. It may not work for everybody, but basically it's simple. I basically just, as I said, the same thing with the mentor, like finding someone who does something you want to do. And I basically just found that person who I could build a relationship with. And I was like, hey, I want to go to coffee. And I would recommend that to anybody because I feel like, if anything, everyone likes to talk about themselves, no matter what they tell you. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. And I think the minute you say, hey, I want to talk to you about you and how you got to where you are, their journey may not work for you exactly, but there's little
Right.
there's little you know speckles and
Yeah.
trinkets and little things you'll pick up that'll work for you, honestly. And then yeah, and then fast forward, I actually worked in project management for a little bit. That's where I kind of landed in at that first agency. And then I remember, I feel like I'm shouting out a lot of people. I was working with this creative who I'm friends with till this day, named Adrian Franks.
Hmm.
Shouts to AD. And I remember I was kind of like so just quickly explain that. I don't know if you ever had a PM on your show either, but a PM's job is kind of more so internal, but they kind of keep the process going with the internal teams, with the
Yep.
creative strategy, make sure all the meetings happen, yada yada. And then once the idea is signed off, they hand it off to the producer, and the producer makes it.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I
so
didn't
just
know
a
that
quick
there was a
explanation.
handoff there.
Yeah,
I always, because I was in account, and I always respected the project managers for being just so on point all the time. So you're
yeah,
saying the producers that are pretty much on that on the other side of the coin there, like they pick
yeah.
up what.
Yeah, there's some agencies where the producer works as the PM, and you're involved
Mhm.
in the beginning. But the traditional route is PM kind of keeps things rolling because as a producer, you're focused on getting bids and getting numbers, and you got to
It's a
make sure
hard job.
everything's
That's
everything's
not
buttoned
easy
up.
stuff.
No, it's not. But once you do it, once some people are just made for it. Like they're just
Yeah.
I don't know if you probably met people who are just naturally like organized. Like their
Yeah.
notebook is color coded. They have notes. They know exactly what
Yeah.
they're doing.
It's not me, but
Um, but yeah. Quickly back to so I was talking to Adrian. I was talking to AD, my friend Adrian,
mhm.
and I remember I was just giving creative notes on something. And he was like, you might want to look into production. And he explained it to me like basically producer, like I just said, is similar
Mhm.
to PM, but you're more so involved in the production side of things. You have more influence on the product, on the creative, and what comes out, and you have a creative opinion on things. And then since then, I was just like focused on that. Um,
Love it.
and then, yeah, I mean, I think one point I actually, unless you had any questions on that,
No.
no.
What's your
So
point?
yeah, so one point on that is I think looking back, hindsight is always 2020.
Mhm.
Looking back, I think what I should have did because I was junior at the time was find an agency or stay with an agency and just move kind of start over into in production, and kind of get kind of just relearn everything. But again, I think that ego is striking, and I was like, nah, like I don't want to start over. I'm gonna have to relearn stuff. I might get paid less. And then I think this is one thing that can work for some people, and sometimes it doesn't work. I like to call it the lateral move. And basically, after my first job, instead of what I feel like I should have done is go to a new agency and start off as a associate producer and kind of
Mm.
work from there. But what I did was, because I kind of chased the money, I ended up taking a project management role at another agency and then trying to make the jump there, which is a lot harder because, once you kind of, it's not difficult, it's not impossible, you can do it. But once you kind of climb up the ladder and, financially and skill level, um, not all levels translate exactly. Luckily, production and project management do. But
Okay.
like, if you want to be a strategist to account person, that kind of translate. But if you want to be account to a creative, that's totally different because, you gotta get you gotta get a reel, you gotta get a book, all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I went to a new agency um, to work on. It was M United to work on Microsoft, and yeah, I mean that was a great experience too. And the one thing I'll say is what I said earlier about like working in every department to figure out what you want to do and doing this lateral move. No, to me, none of your experience, all your experience that you do, everything you learn is going to help you in the future in one way or another.
I like that.
It's always going to help you. So like to me, I would say to anyone listening, never regret working on a job or working in one place too long.
Mm.
um I think that whatever you do will always, whether it's like how to handle people, not handle people, but how to deal with different personalities,
Absolutely. Handling
or
people is the right way to say
or
it. Yeah.
or yeah, because I mean, like they say project management, back in the day they used to say it's like herding wet cats. So it's like that skill it teaches you a lot, because like even now, like I worked at agencies, or I know agencies that where the producer is the project manager, and a lot of producers
Mhm.
are having a tough time because they've never had to do that front end part of the creative. Versus
Right.
me, it was a little easier lift because I've
You
done
can
it
do it both.
before. Yeah, and I can kind of do
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. I like that
um
advice.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, but then you broke into some larger agencies too after that, and we don't have to get into them, but you were at WPP, you've been at McCann, TBWA, Shy a Day. So obviously some of these larger agencies, and then we can talk a whole hour about, big versus small, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure some of these larger agencies with the reputation they have, they're looking for like successful people that are super creative and capable. So you obviously fit the bill in those categories. But, you know, any other like advice, like looking back that you have, like to the aspiring producer that you would give from any of your jobs or just in your career recently?
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, like I have tons of advice. Actually, I
Mhm.
spoke to some of it about like, making a lateral jump,
Of course.
um, and like pivoting into a new role. Um, I think I'm trying to think. I think in terms of production, just begin putting your reel or your website together early on. Like I think like what you said about doing spec work is interesting, because I think when I look at a producer's website, it's cool to see that they worked on, a bunch of cool brands and stuff, but I always find it interesting to see what they do on the side. Like I think a lot of your creative passion outside of advertising influences what you do in advertising. So I think
Love this.
that's super important to kind of keep your creative passion alive, even if you do it kind of in passing or blase, like on the weekend. Like to me, a huge passion is film, like watching films. I've watched films and movies. I mean, everyone's watched film and movies, but like I would say within the last 10-15 years, I really like focused on like, how it's filmed, lighting, who was the director, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And that stuff influences you're creative, and it influences how you look at how to produce something and make something.
So you're
Um,
looking at you look at a lot of reels, you said. So the passion projects, their side projects, that's just as important as their spec work or their internship work, you're saying.
yeah, exactly. Yep. I love to
Gotcha.
see stuff that a director or that aspiring producer is like, oh wait, you produced this cool thing. Like
Mhm.
even before, like when I was like first starting out, like just kind of take a step back. I remember talking to like I had a friend. I would reach out to everybody and be like, hey, like all my videographer friends and editor friends, I'd be like, hey, like what are you doing? Like what are you shooting? Can I help? Can I be associate producer? Just so I can get that experience under my belt. And like I remember I had a friend who shot a video and like the cat skills, and it was like some random music video for some up and coming artists,
Mhm.
not very well named. So like,
That's
don't
okay.
ask me who it was, but like, and I didn't get paid, but I got to stay at this cool farm for the weekend and help give direction and lighting and help out.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just stuff like that I think helps. And like I had a friend, um, close friend to this day, named Max Twitty, who has a blog and does like menswear stuff. And I've done a lot of work with him like early on, because like he was doing like film and photography and events, and I would just like do stuff like that to kind of just get that experience and get that exposure under my belt. It wasn't necessarily directly influencing my advertising career, but just like working on projects like that, I think always helps for sure.
Gotcha. And then you recommend putting that in there in your book, or you call it reel, website, whatever you wanna.
Yeah, I think if you feel comfortable, if it helps,
Mhm. Build your brand
build your
in a good way.
brand as, yeah, in a good way, like I think you should definitely put on your reel. I think
Yep.
it's kind of like your resume. Like you put on your reel, and then
Then you get yeah,
excuse me, once you have enough stuff that's like a little
good
bit
like
more closer to
better.
your career,
Yeah.
not even better, but just stuff that's like more focused on your
Yeah,
career path,
more
then
tuned
you
in.
could take that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it'll get better over time,
Yeah, of
your
course.
work. Yeah. Yeah, I love that advice. Anything else that you had written down that you were like, you really wanted to get out there? I think this is a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot, but anything else that you just are dying to tell the people out there that are recent
Yeah.
grads or just maybe career transitioners that want to go into production?
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of keep it sweet, short and sweet,
Okay.
because I have a couple of points. There was one important one that I really wanted to talk about, but I can't
Yeah.
find it in my
Take your
notes.
time.
But
Take your time.
um, I want to say for anyone starting, um, you don't have to be an expert. I think one of the things for me, starting, and I've seen in some people who are starting out, is like you feel like you need to know everything. You need to know how everything moves, how everything works, and you don't. I think it's important to rely on your team, and to kind of don't bear the burden of the entire project on your shoulders.
I like that.
It's a team effort. If you're into sports, um, anyone who's listening, if you're into sports, you know, Tom Brady, LeBron James, Michael Jordan. I'm dating myself by saying that, Kobe Bryant.
You bet
Rest in peace to
no, I
Kobe Bryant.
mean, we're
But like,
Chicago. We're
yeah.
Chicago.
Oh
We love
yeah, yeah,
the Jordan.
Chicago,
Yeah,
Michael Jordan, of course. But yeah, like no one wins championships by themselves. No
right.
one. And that's how I look at, once you complete a project. That's the kind of the pedestal I put it on. I think also just like make it having a passion. I think the one thing I'll say is all your projects. I think a lot of people come into this game thinking like, oh, I'm going to work on Nike, I'm going to work on Apple, I'm going to do all this cool shit on Google. And I think starting out, you're probably not. I actually have gotten lucky in a lot of projects and worked with a lot, like some big name directors in the advertising space or in the creative
Mhm.
space. But like that won't always be the case. But I think you should give the same passion and same work ethic to the smaller projects that you do to the the cooler projects, because
Love that.
um you know oh, one thing that no one told me going in, but
Yeah.
it's super important, is that the advertising agents the advertising industry is small.
Yeah.
When I say small, I mean I'm working in Richmond. I was working with an account person in LA, and that person just so happened to know someone I used to work with at my old agency, and like I've seen it happen. It happens more so as you kind of climb the ladder, but like
Mhm.
you'll work somewhere and there's probably like not even 6 degrees, probably even 3 degrees of separation of like
Oh,
you'll
yeah.
know someone that knows someone. And that's why I say you should put passion in everything, because I've seen people not get jobs because they're like, hey, you used to work with so and so back in the day. What do you think? And I'm like, and I've heard and seen them say like, no, that person's
Yeah.
horrible. Don't hire them,
Small industry.
or just like, yo, I don't think he's a good fit for the team.
Yeah.
Um, and it could be from any project. Treat everybody with the same respect you want. Um, I don't want to. I don't want to. I have so much advice I don't want to dwell on. I think two things. Um, three final things that I do in terms of advice I want to give. One is I'm kind of paraphrasing the thing that I was trying to say, but owning your career. I think if there's one thing I've learned is that, no offense to people who have mentored me or people who have helped me, but I think figuring out what you want and then focusing your career and then figuring out the creative jobs that are going to help you build towards that is super important, because sometimes if you leave it in the hands of others, you'll be waiting for the right job or you'll be waiting for the right project. And I think you need to be aggressive in the sense of like, hey, like I want to work on this, or this producer is working with this creative. I want to work on that. And like go out in your agency and talk to people and be like, hey, like, and tell whoever's, distributing the resourcing and be like, hey, like I heard so and so is working on this. Can I work on that? Can I help? Blah blah. And you have to be not kind of, you have to be hungry and kind of
Mhm.
put yourself out there. Like I say that because I'm kind of a extrovert introvert, and like I'm not normally like at work it's easy for me to be outgoing, but like I'm not normally that kind of person who's like I'm gonna like go and like meet people. But
Yeah.
you definitely have to, especially when it comes to vendors, because like you'll have to meet vendors that they'll help and tell you kind of like what's going on the film production side if you're doing film and broadcast. And they're like your best friends, so like you have to be able to have that personality to like kind of put yourself out there.
Right.
um the last two things
Mhm.
that I want to talk about, that is super important. I've learned this from many of friends, is finding an advocate. I think it's super important. Unfortunately, in this business, it can be quite fickle. I've seen, especially before when COVID hit, like some agencies, you can lose one big client that's helping to kind of fund um, people's salary,
Yep.
leave, and then the next day there's an all agency meeting, and a lot of people you work with can go, or you can go. So I'm not saying that to worry anybody coming into the industry,
No,
but
it's a reality.
I'm just saying that as a reality, that you need to have an advocate of someone who's in upper management who has your back,
Exactly.
who's like, hey, like, um don't like Sean's not on that list. Like he's great.
Yeah.
He's always down to work on this project. He's always down to, work hard, put his all. We need him. And
Advocate's
also
fantastic.
too, just for anyone who's entering from like an entry level, you usually don't have to worry about that so much, just because depending on what your salary is, they usually start with the big wigs first,
Yeah,
who's
it's
getting
yeah.
paid the most. So
Interesting, yeah.
you normally don't have to worry about that so much, but it's just a reality. It's something that I didn't know, and it was one of those things that did keep me on edge
Mhm.
when I first started, because I didn't realize the game. You got to know the
Sure.
rules of any game you're playing. My friend Eric Ross told me that. Shout out to Eric Ross. Um, and then the last thing is, speaking of advocacy and having someone that has your back. I think I was talking to another friend, another Eric Service, who I
Okay.
worked with at Chiat, and I think it's important. He pointed something out to me. Um, I think it's important for anyone to know when do you know when you need to know when it's time to go. Like I think in most industries, especially advertising, but in most industries, we're not working like our parents did, where you stay at a company for 30 years and you
Right.
retire. I think it helps a lot in this industry when you do move around a little bit because you get more experience, you work with new teams, you work with new people.
Right.
And like I said earlier, knowing your goals and knowing what you want for your career will help you know when it's time to go. Because I think if you have a plan and you know what you want to do and kind of where you want to steer your career, you'll know like, all right, I've spoken, like, don't just leave. Like you
Right.
speak to your
Right.
supervisor, you say like, hey, you don't even have to wait for your review. You can do it before then. You
Of
speak to them and say,
course.
hey, this is what I want to do. Um, I want to do more TV, or maybe you don't want to do TV. I want to do more print or still
Hmm.
photography, or I want to do more animation. And if they don't make that happen, maybe your clients aren't doing that. So that's also another thing to look out for. But that's not the agency's fault. That's just like the nature of what the client wants to do creatively.
Right.
But you look out for that, and if that doesn't change within, you give yourself a time limit. You say like, all right, I'm going to be here for a year, and these are the things I want to do. And well, you don't tell them you're going to give them a year.
Right. This is all.
But you tell
Yeah.
yourself internally, you tell yourself like, hey, I'm going to give myself a year, I'm going to do this. And if you feel like they're not making a move, then I think that's when you start to look. That's why um communication and having contacts and meeting people is so important, because like you can have a rep be like, hey, like, I know this producer who's looking for a job, and they can help you get jobs or help you get interviews. I'm not gonna say help you get a job. You really get the job. But there are a lot of places, a lot of people, once you've had enough time working in production or even just agencies in general, where you'll meet people and it'll be like, hey, like, I used to work with this guy. Actually, just take a step back. That's how I got my job at Chiat. I Just a quick story. There was an account person who had left M United, and I had reached out to him, and he was like, yeah, like, I think we're hiring. And then the head of project management at Chiat had reached out to me, and I was like, hey, like, we want to bring you for an interview, and I was able to like make a move. But yeah, it's super important to like just keep your contacts up. And like, I think, just to wrap up my point, you'll feel it. You'll know like, all right, I'm not doing stuff that I feel like is benefiting my career. And I think you'll know like, all right, it's time to make a move. And I think most agencies don't. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the head of HR, but I don't think a lot of agencies take it personally. I think people
No.
know like people move around in the industry. But yeah,
Yeah.
always leave. Don't burn a bridge, because
Right.
you never know if you want to come back, or if that
Yeah.
person become. I've seen people who've left one agency I was at and become like the head, or
Right. It's that
executive somewhere else.
going back to that
Yeah,
small
exactly.
industry for
And
sure.
then
You always want to leave.
you're like, oh shit, like, when I
Yeah.
left, I like,
Yeah.
cursed them out and told them like, I never want to
Yeah.
see you
Don't
guys
do that
again.
for sure.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
I think knowing when it's time to go is super important, and knowing what you want is
Love
super
it.
important. Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic advice. I'm assuming people can reach out to you with any questions. I will put your information in our bio off our Instagram, Breaking Entering Pod, and we'll have your reels. We'll have we'll have your LinkedIn if that's okay with you.
It is totally fine. I think, yes, people can reach out to me. I mean, um, one other final point, in 2022 is going to be another anniversary. It's going to be 10 years that I've been in advertising. I've been saying like, I definitely want to reach out and help as many people as I can, advice,
Mm.
recommendations, all that stuff. So,
Well, perfect.
you're helping me with my New Year's resolution early.
There it is. There it is. I'm glad I can help you with that and how you're helping myself and my audience and on the Breaking Entering podcast. So, Sean, that's all I got for you. That it's been fantastic, and I'm gonna have to go now, but we'll have everybody reach out and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. I look forward to it, man. And thank you for having me. It's been a
Of
pleasure.
course. No problem. Did you hear anything on this episode about a job you'd like to have someday, soon, in advertising, strategy, design? The kind of job where you use your brain and your creativity? If you did, chances are a portfolio can really help you get that job. That's where Chicago Portfolio School comes in. They have programs and classes that help you show off your thinking and get you the job you want. So visit them at chicagoportfolio.com. And if you drop my name, Gino, into the chat box, they'll send you more info and a cool Sharpie. Or just some more info. You can decide that. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. If you like what you heard, it would mean a lot to us and help us grow and get better guests and better break-ins if you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave us 5 stars and a small review if you have the time. Be sure to connect with our guests if you like what they said by going to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod. That's all one word, Breaking and Entering Pod on Instagram. We have links to their portfolios and their LinkedIn, and they want to connect, so do that. And thank yous. Thank you to Mikey Malarkey, our audio engineer, and Buchan Zhang, our creative director. Can't do without you two, and a team from the University of Illinois. It's a student team from the agency called AdBuzz. They're a PR agency, and it's been a pleasure working with them. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next week with another amazing guest.